So we have designated June as being, of course, the downtime for college football. So a good time to kick off and kick up some rivalry talk. And we stop in the SEC with Arkansas and Missouri. So this one a little bit off the radar, but still some bragging rights here. And it's a bit of a manufactured rivalry, according to the SEC and some of their scheduling determinations here. We got Alex Galbraith on the line from Gridiron Expert. You got to join him right there on his YouTube channel for some college football analysis. And also Colin Anthony joins us from Mazodcast. And you can catch him right there for their take on Missouri sports. And of course, we talk nothing but football right here. All right, guys, we'll start with you, Colin. Give us the Missouri take on this rivalry that, again, Missouri coming just 5 years ago from the Big 12 with a little different perspective and take on things, trying to acclimate the cultures with the SEC, and Arkansas has become the last game of the season.
Well, I think there's probably more contentiousness from the Arkansas side, just from the standpoint. I don't think Missouri. I think they're upset that they're probably considered our rival, and I think you're right when it's sort of manufactured. I don't think there's any love lost between the two teams, but you can't create, a rivalry based off of sort of this, like I said, manufactured, very recent joining the SEC. Obviously, really proximity is our only history. I mean, in truth, if Missouri has developed a rival in the SEC East to this point, it's probably South Carolina or Tennessee, just based on circumstance. But it's something that has to grow over time. I think it is growing over time. I think there was a lot less interest in it initially, and I think it's becoming more of a rivalry. It's got a ways to go before I think either side of the football thinks it's a tried and true blood feud, so to speak.
So it's not like this hasn't been done before. The Big Ten trying to put Maryland and Rutgers together on the last weekend of the season because they joined the conference at the same time. When Penn State joined way back when, about 25 years ago, they pitted them against Michigan State. So it's been done in other conferences, and this is the one that the SEC has put together, and geographically it works. So, Alex, your thoughts about Mizzou and Arkansas, will it work long term? And is Colin pointed out, Arkansas fans feel more like, okay, we played this game on the final Friday of the season against LSU, and that was working out pretty well, and now you've got us against Missouri.
Yeah, you're exactly right. In Arkansas, we always viewed LSU as our main rival, and it was probably just because we had been facing LSU the day after Thanksgiving for so long. You had the battle for the Golden Boot. And there was a lot of history there. Had tons of instant classics between LSU and Arkansas, games that ruined one another's national championship or SEC championship hopes, or ruined major bowl berths. So there's just that history there between Arkansas and LSU that made us feel like they were the true rival, and maybe LSU kind of felt that way too. Here with Missouri, it's just so young, such a young rivalry. They've only faced, I think, 4 times since Missouri joined the SEC back in 2012, and really none of those games have had any major circumstances in terms of affecting the way a team season ends. I know had Arkansas won in 2014, they would have kept Missouri out of the SEC championship, so maybe you could have started off that first meeting with some bad blood there. But besides that, there really hasn't been any major event happening. I know Gary Pinkel's last game was in 2015, but he, of course, stepped down for health reasons. And then last year, Brett Bielema's last game, but regardless of the outcome, I think he would have been fired. So really, there's not much history, only 9 meetings between these teams. I think, like Colin was saying, this has the potential to work. I just think it's going to take some time. It does feel a little forced, this battle line rivalry. They threw the trophy in there in 2015, which is a pretty nice trophy. But, they're trying to make this thing feel forced, where Arkansas used to see their rival as LSU, and they had to switch the dates for that. Missouri always seeing their biggest rival as Kansas, now in the SEC, like he said, South Carolina or Tennessee. But it feels like it's very forced. But I feel like you give it maybe another 5-10 years, especially as these two programs continue to get better and maybe see themselves with that last Friday in November having some major circumstances for their future. I can see that developing into a much greater rivalry.
Hey, Colin, it sounds a little more tradition-rich when you throw in that the first game was played between these two teams in 1906. But besides that, 9 games since 1906.
Yeah, I think he makes a good point. These teams have not really been in position in this 5 years. I mean, Missouri's got a couple SEC East championships in that time frame, but I don't remember necessarily that Arkansas could have derailed that necessarily. I mean, they're a West team. They're not going to hurt us as far as a head-to-head matchup with an East team. I just feel like there hasn't been any gravity in these games. I agree. I mean, there's 150 years of history with Kansas. You can't replicate that overnight. As he mentioned, there's been circumstances where Arkansas is in a position to really throw a wrench into LSU's season, and that adds excitement. And like I said, Arkansas has been down for a few years. Missouri has been very up and down the last couple of years. It's hard to get excited. When I talk about South Carolina or Tennessee, it's just because there has been some tension in those games because they're East head-to-head matchups. And, Tennessee always, sort of perpetually being rated for the East, and really, at least from Missouri fan standpoints, I think it has been as vitriolic to Missouri joining the SEC as any fan base we have dealt with, and in my opinion. And so that adds some tension. It certainly makes it fun when we beat them. And South Carolina, we just had some close games and competitive games to try to compete for those SEC East championships when we were actually competitive for them. So those games had some gravity, and to this point, we just haven't had much gravity in that Arkansas-Missouri matchup.
Well, at least the last two games have been competitive and exciting down the stretch. 2 years ago was Arkansas's crash toward the end of the season, in which they had a decent season going and then lost the last few games of the season, including blowing huge leads against Missouri 24-7, then blowing a 24-0 lead in the bowl game against Virginia Tech. And then here last season, obviously, Brett Bielema's final game at Arkansas, losing 48-45 in a shootout that Missouri kind of had control of, but still Arkansas had a shot to win. So, Colin, before I pitch it back to Alex, do Missouri fans feel fully entrenched in the SEC as a part of the league?
Oh, I think Missouri is all in. I think as much as anything, just because they're so disgusted with the Big 12, and when they left, they were more than happy to go to the SEC. It's the number one football conference in the nation. Despite what I think our SEC opponents may have believed, I think we were pretty confident we could be competitive in the SEC from the very beginning. I feel like there was just a general lack of knowledge about Missouri football in general. I think they looked at it as like another Vanderbilt's joining the conference. And that's not who Missouri is. And we're happy to be here. We've enjoyed it. If we want to, if the rest of the conference wants us to pick us as the black hat, we're okay with that. And I don't know, the whipping boy, whatever they want to, the box they want to put us in, we're okay with that. We love it. But I know there's pushback. I mean, Barrett Sally is last season said on his podcast, Texas A&M feels SEC, Missouri, not so much. I don't know what we have to do to feel SEC. I mean, it's 5 years, it's 2 SEC East championships. It's, a winning record against at least the majority of the East teams and a couple of the West, including Arkansas. We have been as competitive as most anybody in the East, certainly. And I just feel like it's going to take time. And Arkansas can relate to this. I mean, what did they join in 1992 or around that? And, I saw this year, people saying Arkansas wasn't SEC. So if Arkansas is not SEC yet, joining in the early 90s, I don't know when Missouri is going to be SEC. I don't know any of the three of us will be alive once if we're officially considered SEC. So we'll see. But Missouri's happy to be here. I think Missouri is all in. I don't know about the rest of the conferences on Missouri.
Yeah, if you don't have too many years on you, you don't know what the difference is. You don't know if these teams have been around since 1930 or just joined in 1991 like a South Carolina or an Arkansas. But when it comes to Missouri, I got to say, winning the 2 Eastern Division championships should have shown something, because that surprised me. Of course, they caught the window in which the league was a little bit down on that side, but still, hey, 7-1 those 2 seasons in the SEC, and they took advantage of a bit of a downturn from Tennessee and Florida at that point, Georgia to a certain extent at that point. So Alex, maybe we talk a little more about the programs and where they stand right now. And Arkansas is certainly in flux right now, with a new coach and facing what is considered the best division in college football, top to bottom.
Yeah, there's Fayetteville right now, there's a lot of excitement surrounding this Arkansas program, a lot of unknowns, which is why there's a lot of excitement. You bring in Chad Morris, who a lot of people are very critical of because he and the majority of his staff have never coached a single game in the SEC. He's bringing most of his staff over from SMU, where he didn't do great, but definitely improved them from when he inherited them. So there's a lot of excitement around there. If you go and look at the team as an overall, Arkansas, I think, has one of their best defenses in terms of returning players that they've had in a very, very long time, which is funny to say considering how bad their defense was last year. I think allowing over 30 points a game and on average like over 400 yards a game. So a horrendous defense from last year, but they bring in John Chavis over from Texas A&M, who is transitioning back from that 3-4 to a 4-3 defense. Arkansas, as you remember, switched to 3-4 last year after many years of 4-3. Now they're switching back. But I think this defense is going to be the strength of this Arkansas team. There's just a lot of uncertainty on the offensive side of the ball, which is also interesting considering Chad Morris is a more offensive-minded coach. We have a quarterback battle there between Ty Story and Cole Kelly. At least those are the top two front runners, in my opinion. And after watching the spring game back in April, if I were going to give the starting job over right now, I would give it to Ty Story. He just looked a lot better to me than Cole Kelly did in that game. People will say that the stats were practically identical, but I think Ty Story looked more poised in the pocket, was making better decisions with his throws, more so than Cole Kelly, who, although he did have more SEC experience last year, I just don't think looked as sharp in the spring game. And then on the Missouri side, of course, we can go all the way back to the end of the 2016 season when they beat Arkansas after they blew a 24-7 lead. I think that game for me really showed that Missouri was starting to trend back up. I really saw them as a team. You knock off an Arkansas team who was decent at that time, but they were able to battle back, showed some pretty good offense there. And, they only had, I think, 3 wins at that point in the season. And then after that, even though they had, a 1-5 start last season, winning all those straight games to get back to a bowl game really showed me that they were back on the right track. And I think Barry Odom's doing a great job there. And I know that as long as they have Drew Lock, they can be a competitor in the SEC East.
I think it's a good point, Colin. It was almost meeting in the middle there where Arkansas seemed to be trending up, and they had gained some ground each and every season under Brett Bielema, got to 8 wins, got in that area where they were starting to make some noise in the SEC West. And then they just catapulted at the end of that season or just dropped off, and Missouri kind of met them on the way up. And Missouri's been a much better program since then and surprised a lot of us with 7 wins under Barry Odom last year. But you most likely have the best quarterback in the league coming back next year.
Yeah, not just Drew Lock. We have Alberto, who's a tight end who who's led all tight ends in the SEC with touchdown passes, was an all-freshman player. We have Manuel Hall coming back, who was one of the leading receivers in the SEC. The offensive line, despite the struggles the last few seasons, has been good. Despite the fact that the offense has struggled at times, Drew Lock has managed to stay clean in the pocket. Crockett is a frontline running back, is probably has a chance to be an all SEC player. The offense has talent across the board, as much talent as just about any team you're going to find in the SEC. Now, can Derek Dooley, a guy who's never called plays before and is best known for running a dumpster fire of a program at Tennessee, the guy who can make that all come together, that is yet to be seen. He's a new OC and he has not called plays before, and there'll be very little excuses available to him, because with this roster talent on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, you feel like anybody could probably succeed. The defense is less certain. I mean, you got Terry Beckner Jr., who is going to play on Sundays. He's his own one-man wrecking crew, but they lost Marcel Frazier on the outside. They've got a couple kids they're excited about, but it's hard to know on the defense. They played so many players on defense last year. They started with some of the upperclassmen. They started to work in freshmen because they just were abysmal on defense, and they were just kind of throwing everything against the wall to see what sticks. And so it's hard to pick out players on the defensive side of the ball for Missouri that you go, wow, these guys are going to make a big difference, aside from Terry Beckner Jr. Maybe Rashad Brandon. He was a young kid last year who showed some flashes on the defensive line, but the linebackers, it's just hard to say. They showed promise, but very inconsistent. The secondary was a wreck last year. Barry Odom's a defensive coach. You hope he can get it figured out, but there's just not a lot on the defensive side of the ball, at least as compared to a very talented offensive side that gives Missouri fans a great deal of confidence. We're going to score a lot of points. I don't think even Derek Dooley can screw that up, but can we stop anybody, I think, is the initial trepidation with most Mizzou fans right now.
Well, we've got dozens and dozens of comments on the chat. Unfortunately, we don't have time to get to them. We do have one particular person commenting, Colin, Ricky here, come to the Big Ten, boys. You've got a rival here on your northern border, talking about Iowa there. But I think Missouri doing just fine, feeling good about their place in the SEC. There was a time there right when Mizzou joined and the first season was rough, and considering that they were typically a 7 or 8 win program in the Big 12, I thought, man, this could be a rough go for this program. And Gary Pinkel obviously proved us wrong for a few seasons. And then again, I thought after Pinkel left, I thought, man, this could be a rough decade again for Mizzou football. And they certainly looked bad for about a year and a half. And then now they're showing that they can get to postseason play and do some things. So, Colin, this is the last thing I'll leave either one of you with. I apologize because of some of the technical difficulties we had. We couldn't carry on the conversation as long, and we've got USC and UCLA coming up. But, Colin, in regards to the recruiting footprint and some of the disadvantages that you have, considering that if you rank 9th or 10th in the SEC in recruiting, you're usually like 22nd in the nation. It's that good. How do you feel Barry Odom's doing there? And is Texas, is that the place where Mizzou basically goes to get most of its best talent?
Yes, it is. That was a pipeline that Gary Pinkel started at the beginning of his tenure. Texas has been very good to Missouri. Players like Chase Daniel have come out of Texas. He was too small to play quarterback at Texas, according to Texas, and he just came and was a potential Heisman candidate and a draft pick for Missouri, and took them within a breath of the championship game and beat Oklahoma and did some great things at Missouri. But Texas is where most of those kids come from. Now they have started to make inroads. They got a couple linebackers out of Georgia. I think they got a defensive back out of Florida. There's some guys coming from that footprint. Now, whether those guys are you really stealing them from the LSUs and the Alabamas of the world, or are those just players that Alabama and LSU aren't looking at? It's hard to say, but they're starting to make inroads. And like I said, they've always made their hay in Texas, and they're continuing to do that. And I've heard some people say, well, how can you keep that going in the SEC? Well, Texas has an SEC team. We're going to be in Texas for Texas A&M. Texas A&M is there. That's their inroad. Everybody's using that. So, but all that being said, Barry Odom has had some defections last year from his recruiting class. It's probably, it's been some very up and down stuff with Barry Odom as far as coaching and the seasons and everything going on. And one of the biggest concerns, probably the top concern on that list for Barry Odom, is recruiting. There was the Missouri 10, a really good recruiting class coming out of Missouri that he really he missed on most everybody and had some big time recruits defect. So there is some trepidation. Can he keep a Missouri team competitive? He's not going to be more competitive in recruiting, but it's early on, and you never know. Missouri has lived much like a Wisconsin team on 2- and 3-star guys, developing them into NFL talents. So, joining the SEC isn't going to change that. We're not suddenly going to get 5-star recruits. We're going to have to get those 2- and 3-star guys and develop them. And that's where we're always going to make our hay.
All right. We enjoyed the conversation here during Rivalry Month. Arkansas, Mizzou, they play on the last Friday of the season, and the SEC pushing this one as a rivalry of the future. As we've got Colin Anthony on the line. You can join him on the Mazad podcast covering the Tigers, all sports. But obviously, we're talking football right here, getting you set for August camp. We got Alex Galbraith on the line as well, the Gridiron expert on YouTube. Please join him right there for college football analysis. Guys, we appreciate you jumping on board. Would love to have you back talking more Mizzou and Arkansas.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
Would like to let everyone else know that if you're on the chat and want to see some more college football coverage right here, USC, UCLA, as soon as we can turn this thing around. So stay right there. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.